The day war changed sides. The sky above the earth was no longer blue. It had turned dark with the shadow of the Orcs fleet. Thousands of alien warships floated in silence, blocking sunlight, spreading fear across the planet. The Orcs Empire had conquered over 200 worlds. No one had ever resisted them. Every species they faced surrendered within days, but this time it was different. This time they were facing humans. Commander Varnak stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching Earth spin slowly below. He had studied humans. Primitive, emotional, divided, weak, or so he believed. But something felt off. The humans had not contacted them. They had not begged for peace. They had simply waited, watching. Down on Earth, military units moved like ghosts. No broadcasts. No panic, only silent movement. Across every continent, humans activated old satellites, strange communication towers, and strange coded networks that confused the Orcs sensors. Varnak didn't understand the language, but it wasn't just words. It was something deeper, the rhythm, the emotion. It made his men uneasy. Then came the first strike. It was not a missile. It was not a fleet. It was a song. A strange, loud, echoing sound bounced through space, shaking the Orcs systems. It was something the humans called heavy metal. It was raw, angry, loud. Alive, Orcs crew members clutched their ears. The systems jammed. One ship exploded without warning. Another drifted off course and crashed into its neighbor. Within moments, the perfect order of the fleet broke into chaos. Commander Varnak shouted for control, but even his voice was lost in the madness. That's when he saw them. Human fighter jets. Not advanced like Orcs ships, not shiny or smooth, but fast. Wild, unpredictable. They moved in strange patterns, not like machines but like creatures hunting for blood. One by one, they dived into the fleet, firing strange weapons, dodging lasers, even crashing into larger ships and ejecting just in time. The commander couldn't believe it. These humans were not trying to survive. They were fighting like they were born in war. Like they enjoyed it. One human pilot even flew straight through a burning wreck just to get a better shot. The Orcs had faced armies before, but never something like this. Within minutes, 3 capital ships were gone. Hundreds of Orcs soldiers floated in space, lost and screaming. And the humans? They didn't stop. They kept coming, wave after wave, each group wilder than the last. Their weapons weren't just metal and fire. Their greatest weapon was madness. A kind of beautiful chaos the Orcs couldn't calculate. On the ground, a single human soldier walked across a battlefield littered with broken drones. He was calm. His uniform was torn, his face was covered in ash, but he smiled. The Orcs drone aimed its weapon at him and fired. Smoke covered everything. But when it cleared, the soldier was still standing, bleeding, laughing. He raised a simple human-made rocket launcher and fired. The drone exploded. The soldier walked on. Commander Varnak watched the footage and felt something new. Not anger. Not confusion. It was fear. He had never feared any enemy before. But these humans, they were something else. They were not organized. They were not logical. But they were unstoppable. They fought with fire in their blood and death in their eyes. His second-in-command asked, "Should we retreat?" Varnak did not answer. He looked at Earth again. The blue planet that did not kneel. He remembered the ancient reports, the warning signs. The other species that whispered in dark corners about the one place even the boldest warlords avoided. They had called it a death world. Now he understood why this was not a planet to conquer. This was a planet that turned war into an art. These humans had learned to live with pain, hunger, fire, and fear. And in doing so, they had become something terrifying. They had become gods of war. Varnak gave the order to fall back, but it was too late. Human ships had already circled around them. A final message came from Earth. It was just a few words. No threats, no demands. Just a simple sentence that chilled every soul in the fleet. You brought war to our home. Now let us show you what war really means. The screen went black. The war had changed. And so had the fear. It no longer belonged to Earth. It now belonged to the stars. The weapon. They can't understand the Orcs fleet. Had never seen anything like it before. They sent their deadliest plasma tanks down to Earth, expecting to crush the humans quickly. But instead the humans walked through fire and explosions like ghosts with no fear or hesitation. The tanks fired relentless beams of blue plasma tearing through the ground and buildings. But the humans did not run. They moved with strange agility, disappearing behind rocks, trees, and ruins. The Orcs soldiers could not believe their eyes. Their weapons were powerful, but useless against these strange fighters. The humans seemed to know the battlefield better than any machine could. They used the Earth itself as a weapon, throwing dirt and debris at the tanks, confusing their sensors. The Orcs tanks began to malfunction. Unable to track the quick-moving humans, the humans attacked with makeshift weapons, knives and clubs along with small guns. But their most powerful tool was their mind. Their unpredictability made the Orcs lose control. Among the human fighters was one they called the Phantom. The Orcs had never seen anything like him. He appeared suddenly from nowhere, striking with deadly precision, then vanished as if he was a shadow. The Orcs soldiers reported seeing the Phantom walk through walls and reappear behind their lines. Their scanners could not track him. His presence caused fear and confusion among the Orcs troops. The Orcs scientists tried to analyze the Phantom, but they failed to understand his abilities. They called it a human weakness, emotional instability, but it was their greatest strength. The Phantom fought with a wild passion that no machine could imitate. His moves were strange, chaotic, yet perfectly timed, like a dance of destruction. The Orcs began to realize that humans did not fight like any other species in the command ship. Commander Varnak studied the battlefield reports. The humans were winning battles without heavy weapons or advanced technology. It was as if their strength came from within, not from machines. The Orcs generals argued about how to defeat these warriors, but no plan worked. The humans adapted quickly, changing their tactics every hour. The Orcs scanners detected strange human signals that seemed like laughter, music, and cries of pain mixed together. This confused the Orcs systems more than any weapon. The humans used sound as a weapon, disrupting communications and sensors. Their battle cries echoed across the fields, turning fear into fury. On one battlefield, a group of humans faced a line of Orcs plasma tanks. The humans did not hide. They formed a circle and began to chant a low rhythmic sound. The tanks fired again, but the human circle held firm. The sound seemed to disrupt the tanks' firing mechanisms, causing them to jam. Suddenly the humans charged with knives and strange devices, disabling the tanks one by one. The Orcs soldiers were caught off guard by the humans' strange tactics. Their weapons could not break the human spirit. The soldiers started to panic as their tanks failed. Behind the scenes on Earth, a team of scientists and soldiers worked together, studying the alien technology and human biology. They were trying to understand why humans could fight so differently. One scientist said it was because humans felt emotions deeply and used them to fuel their strength. Commander of the human forces explained that humans had learned to live with fear, pain, and anger, and turned these feelings into power. The humans' unpredictability was their weapon. Their emotions made them dangerous. The Orcs could not calculate or control this chaos. The Phantom led a daring raid on an Orc supply base. Under the cover of night, he slipped through defenses, disabling alarms and destroying supplies without a single shot. He moved like a ghost, invisible to sensors and soldiers. His legend grew among both humans and Orcs troops. Some Orcs soldiers whispered about him in fear, saying he was not human, but something else, a creature born from war itself. The Phantom's presence alone was enough to lower enemy morale. He inspired the humans to fight harder and gave the Orcs nightmares. The Orcs tried to use their most advanced AI, to predict human movements, but it failed every time. The AI was designed to learn and adapt, but it could not understand human emotions and chaos. It kept expecting humans to behave logically, but humans never did. The Orcs realized that their greatest weapon against other species was useless here. The humans fought with madness, passion, and heart. This made them unpredictable and unstoppable. The Orcs began to question everything they knew about War Commander. Varnak met with his top generals. They were desperate to find a way to stop the humans. The humans were not just winning battles, they were breaking the Orcs spirit. The generals proposed more weapons, bigger fleets, and new strategies. But Varnak knew none would work without understanding the humans. The only way to win was to understand the mind of the enemy, but that was the hardest war yet. The humans' weapon was their soul, and that was something no technology could destroy. On a battlefield scarred with fire and smoke, a young human soldier looked up at the setting sun. His face was dirty and bruised, but his eyes shone with determination. He knew the war was not over, but he also knew they had changed the rules of battle forever. The humans had become more than fighters. They had become legends, living proof that strength comes from within, not just from machines or weapons. The war was far from over, but the humans had already won the first battle of minds and hearts. The Orcs fleet retreated to regroup, but the fear stayed in their hearts. The humans had shown them a new kind of war, a war they could not win with just guns and ships. The day the humans stood against the greatest empire in the galaxy was the day the war truly changed sides. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were gods of war, and their story was just beginning. The Ghost Protocol. The Orcs Empire had never faced enemies like humans. Before this war, they had crushed countless rebellions and defeated the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. Yet the humans fought differently. They used not only weapons, but something deeper, something the Orcs could not see or understand. Commander Varnak grew more troubled by the day reports came in that whole fleets were being destroyed from the inside, as if invisible hands had sabotaged their ships. The enemy was not just on the battlefield, but inside their minds and ships. The Orcs called this unknown force the Ghost Protocol, and it terrified them. On Earth, a secret division of the human military moved silently through the shadows. This group was unlike any other. They were trained in fear, invisibility, and surprise. They called themselves the Ghost Protocol. Soldiers of this unit were masters of disguise and deception. They could appear where enemies least expected, then vanish before any attack could be made. One of their leaders was the mysterious figure known as the Phantom. The stories about him were many, but no one really knew who he was. He was more than a soldier. He was a symbol of human resilience and terror to their enemies. One night, a fleet of Orcs ships prepared for a devastating orbital strike. They believed this attack would crush the remaining human resistance, but just before they could fire, explosions rocked their vessels. From inside their own ships, fires spread and systems failed. Ships turned against each other in chaos and confusion. No human ship was near, but the damage was real. Commander Varnak was forced to call a retreat, but his mind raced with questions. How could this happen? How could the humans infiltrate and destroy without being seen? In the ruins of a fallen city, the Phantom moved like a shadow. He slipped past Orcs patrols, silent and deadly. His weapons were precise and his actions swift. He destroyed communication arrays, disabling their ability to coordinate. He left behind no trace, only fear. The captured Orcs soldiers told stories of seeing him standing in empty rooms, his eyes glowing with quiet rage. Some said he was not human, but a ghost born of war itself. His presence broke the minds of even the strongest Orcs warriors. Meanwhile, on Earth, scientists worked to understand the strange connection between human emotions and their ability to fight. The more fear and pain the humans felt, the stronger they seemed to become. They used their minds to break the will of their enemies, not just with weapons, but with terror. The Orcs soldiers began to suffer nightmares, hearing whispers and screams in their dreams. Voices told them to run or be destroyed. This psychological warfare was new and brutal. It made the Orcs question their own sanity. A captured Orc soldier once said that looking into the eyes of a human fighter was like staring into the abyss. There was no fear, only an unbreakable will to win. The humans laughed at death and pain. They fought as if it was a game, and every battle was a dance between life and death. This made them unpredictable, dangerous, and almost unstoppable. The Orcs had trained to fight machines, but they were fighting gods. Now gods of war who controlled fear and chaos like weapons. As the war dragged on, the Orcs generals grew desperate. They tried to capture the Phantom, but he always vanished like smoke. Their best soldiers feared his name and whispered it only in the darkest places. They called him a curse, a shadow, a nightmare. Their ships lost more battles, and their soldiers more hope. Humans seemed to grow stronger with every loss, with every scar. The more pain they faced, the more terrifying they became. Commander Varnak realized that this was no ordinary war. This was a war of souls. The Ghost Protocol was not just a fighting unit. It was a new way of war that the humans had mastered. For the Orcs, this was a mystery they could not solve. For the humans, it was survival. It was their blood, their pain, and their spirit turned into a weapon that machines could not break. This war was no longer about ships or tanks. It was about who could control fear and who could use it to destroy their enemy on a battlefield lit by fires and smoke. The Phantom stood before a group of weary human soldiers. His eyes burned with quiet fury. He told them the war was far from over, but their fight was changing the fate of the galaxy. They were no longer just soldiers. They were legends, living proof that the human spirit was the deadliest weapon of all. The Phantom vanished into the night, leaving behind hope and fear in equal measure. Commander Varnak watched the humans from his command ship. He knew the war was slipping away from him. He was no longer fighting an enemy he could understand. He was fighting ghosts, shadows, and gods. The day the humans changed the rules of war was the day the Orcs empire began to crumble. The ghosts of the humans were everywhere, and they would not be stopped. The war had changed again, and the stars themselves trembled before the gods of war who called themselves humans. The mind war. The Orcs empire was losing more than battles now. It was losing control over its own soldiers. Every night as the war raged on, a strange thing began to happen. Orcs warriors woke from their sleep trembling and screaming. Their dreams were filled with voices, whispers, and laughter, voices that told them to run, to surrender. The fear was different. It was not just the fear of dying, but a fear that burrowed into their minds, breaking their will to fight. The humans had found a new weapon, a weapon that could not be seen or touched but destroyed from within. On the front lines, the humans laughed. They laughed at death, at fire, and at the roaring plasma tanks. Their laughter was not madness. It was a war cry, a sound that spread courage through their ranks and confusion into the enemy. The Orcs could not understand why their enemies smiled while they died. But it was clear the laughter made the humans stronger. The sound echoed over the battlefields, bouncing off rocks and ruins, spreading like a virus. The Orcs soldiers covered their ears, but the laughter only grew louder, making them more desperate and weak. The humans fought with a strange joy in their eyes. They danced between laser beams and dodged blasts like it was a game of chance. They did not fear pain or death. Instead, they welcomed it as a challenge, as a test of their spirit. The soldiers sang songs of battle that made the ground tremble. Their voices rose together, creating a force that shook the very air. The Orcs soldiers felt their courage shatter like glass. Their ranks fell apart as they could not keep up with the strange, wild energy of their opponents. The defeat on the battlefield was not the worst of it. The greatest damage was inside the minds of the Orcs soldiers. Night after night, their dreams were haunted by the humans. Voices telling stories of battle and victory, whispering threats and promises of pain. The Orcs generals tried to calm their troops, but the fear was infectious. It spread like a disease through the ranks, causing panic, confusion, and desertion. Many soldiers left their posts, fleeing into the dark void of space rather than face the humans again. One day, an Orcs general, known for his strength and bravery, approached Commander Varnak. He confessed that he could no longer trust his own mind. He had nightmares of being hunted by shadows that looked like humans. His soldiers whispered of a ghost that killed without weapons. His faith in the Orcs empire was shaken. His hope for victory was fading. The war was no longer fought only with guns but with shadows and minds. Meanwhile, the humans gained new allies. The strange power of their mind war attracted other species oppressed by the Orcs. Many joined the human cause, inspired by their fearlessness and strange battle cries. These new warriors brought their own skills and weapons, but they also learned to fight like humans, laughing, dancing, and shouting. Even in the face of death, they too became part of the growing legend of the gods of war. In a hidden camp deep inside the ruined forests, the Phantom gathered with his closest soldiers. They trained harder and learned to use their laughter and voices as weapons. Their training was not just physical but mental. They learned to enter the minds of their enemies, filling them with fear and doubt. They became masters of the mind war, turning pain into power and fear into strength. The Phantom taught them that the greatest victory was not killing the enemy, but breaking their spirit. Back on the Orcs flagship, Commander Varnek watched as his empire began to crumble from within. He realized that the humans had done something no other species could. They had made war into something more than destruction. They had made it a force of life, a dance of madness and courage, a power that could not be stopped or controlled. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to change the universe itself. The battlefields were no longer places of silence and death. They were filled with music, laughter, and cries of warriors who had become gods. The Orcs soldiers fell one by one, not just to weapons, but to the unstoppable force of the human spirit. The empire that had once ruled the stars was now trembling before the laughter and madness of Earth's defenders. The mind war was won by those who controlled fear and used it to fuel their fury. As the sun set over the war-torn lands, the Phantom stood alone, looking at the stars. He knew the war was far from over, but he also knew that humanity had already won the greatest battle, the battle for their own souls. The humans had shown that even in darkness and pain, there was strength that could destroy empires and build legends. The ghosts of laughter and courage would haunt the stars forever. When gods bleed, they laugh. The battlefields were covered in smoke, fire, and the cries of the wounded. Yet the humans did not stop. They fought with a ferocity that terrified even the hardest warriors. On this day, a small unit of humans was caught in an ambush, surrounded by Orcs soldiers. Their guns fired plasma beams tearing through the ground, but the humans stood their ground, bleeding and battered. Their bodies were broken, but their spirit was unbroken. The soldiers looked at each other and smiled as if the pain only made them stronger. The enemy could not understand this strange power. One human soldier, with a deep scar across his face, held his bleeding arm high. He started to sing a low, haunting song. The melody carried across the battlefield, mixing with the cries of battle. The song was not sadness, but a celebration of life and death. The other humans joined in, their voices rising together, creating a powerful force that shook the hearts of the Orcs warriors. The enemy faltered, confused by this strange defiance. The song filled the humans with renewed strength, as if their blood had turned into fire. The injured soldiers fought back fiercely despite their wounds. They threw themselves at the enemy with knives and makeshift weapons, turning desperation into victory. Their battle cries grew louder and more powerful. The Orcs soldiers began to retreat, unable to face the wild courage of their opponents. The humans had become more than fighters. They had become legends whose strength came from within, whose laughter echoed in the face of death. Among the humans, the Phantom was captured during a fierce fight, but even in chains he did not lose his spirit. His eyes burned with quiet rage and defiance. He smiled at his captors, mocking their fear and weakness. His presence terrified the Orcs soldiers, as if he carried the power of the entire human race within him. The Phantom's capture became a rallying point for the humans, inspiring more to fight harder and push deeper into enemy lines in a daring rescue mission. Human soldiers attacked the Orcs prison camp using old tanks and simple weapons. Their tactics were unexpected, brutal, and effective. They fought with desperation and hope, breaking through enemy defenses and freeing prisoners. The mission was a success, and it showed that humans could win even when they seemed weak. Their courage and unity were their greatest weapons, breaking the chains of fear and oppression. Commander Varnak watched the news of these battles with growing dread. Humans had turned pain into power and defeat into victory. They laughed when they bled and sang when they fought. Their spirit was unbreakable, and it scared him more than any weapon. The Orcs had never faced an enemy who could laugh in the face of death, who could find joy in the darkest moments. This made the humans gods of war, not because of their weapons, but because of their unyielding spirit. War spread across the stars with humans leading the charge. They did not fight for glory or conquest, but for survival and honor. Every battle was a test of their strength and will. They learned from each fight, growing stronger and more united. Their laughter and songs became legends, told in every corner of the galaxy, inspiring fear and respect in their enemies and hope in their allies. The humans' power was not just in their weapons, but in their hearts. They showed that even when gods bleed, they laughed, that pain and suffering could fuel a fire that no enemy could put out. Their battle cries were a promise that they would never surrender, no matter the cost. They had become the gods of war, and their story was still being written in blood and song. As the sun rose over a battlefield stained with fire, the Phantom stood with his soldiers ready for the next fight. His eyes were fierce but calm. He knew the war was far from over, but he also knew that the humans had changed the course of history. They were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, legends, and gods whose laughter would echo through the ages. They tried to surrender too late. The Orcs leaders had seen enough of war. They sent a message to Earth. Their voices carried the tone of defeat and fear. They wanted peace. They wanted to stop the fighting before it destroyed what was left of their empire. But the humans did not answer at once. They did not rush to accept the offer, because this war was more than just battles. It was a fight for respect and survival. The humans had seen too much pain and betrayal to trust easily. Commander Varnak waited anxiously for Earth's reply, but what came back was silence. Then slowly the human fleets continued to advance, crushing Orcs' worlds one by one. Their ships moved with purpose and precision, but with a wild energy that terrified every enemy. They fought not just with weapons, but with a power that seemed to grow stronger with each victory. Other alien species who once served the Orcs began to join the humans, inspired by their courage and strength. They called the humans the Reckoners, because they brought judgment and change wherever they went. Orcs generals could no longer hide the truth. Their empire was breaking. Their soldiers' morale was low. Their weapons were failing. Their spies reported that humans did not just fight with machines, but with their souls. It was as if the humans had learned to turn pain and fear into power and madness into strength. They had become a force the galaxy had never seen before on Earth. Leaders spoke of honor and justice. They said they did not want war, but if war was the language the universe understood, then they would speak it fluently. The humans did not seek conquest, but they would not back down. They had survived impossible odds, and now they were ready to take their place among the stars. Their message was clear. The war was not over, and the humans would finish what they started. Alien diplomats tried to reach out. They begged for peace, but the humans only watched them. Silently, their eyes held a warning. No mercy would be given to those who had brought death to Earth. The humans were no longer afraid of anyone. They had become legends whose stories were told in whispers. Across star systems, children grew up hearing tales of the humans who laughed in the face of death and crushed empires with nothing but courage and willpower. The Phantom prepared his soldiers for the next great battle. His voice was steady and strong. He told them the war was about to enter its final stage, but their fight was not just for victory. It was for the future of humanity and all those who believed in freedom. They were the gods of war, and it was time to show the galaxy why. As the human fleet launched its next attack, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The Reckoners moved like a storm, sweeping through the darkness, leaving destruction and hope in their wake. The Ornax forces tried to hold their ground, but they were broken by the unstoppable tide. The war that had once seemed endless was coming to a violent and powerful end. Commander Varnek watched the collapse of his empire with heavy heart and bitter regret. He knew the humans had awakened something ancient and terrible in the galaxy. They had become more than warriors. They were gods of war whose power was born from pain, courage, and unbreakable. Well, their story was not just about battle. It was about the strength of the human spirit and the price of survival. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humans had changed everything. They had turned war into a force of nature, a legend that would be told for generations. Their laughter and fury had become a symbol of hope and fear. Their enemies would remember the day when Earth stood and said no more. The gods of war had arrived, and they would never leave. Why the galaxy fears Earth. War was over, but the echoes of battle still thundered through the galaxy. The stars seemed quieter now, but beneath that silence lay a trembling fear. The humans had won not by machines or numbers, but by a power no one could challenge. The galaxy watched as Earth stood tall, the planet that had become a legend, a symbol of unstoppable strength and wild courage. Alien diplomats traveled across star systems, begging for peace and alliance, but the humans remained silent. They did not need words. Their presence alone was enough to command respect and fear. The humans were no longer just warriors. They were gods of war, beings who laughed at death, danced with chaos, and turned pain into power. Their fleets moved like storms across the void, but this time not to conquer, but to teach. The galaxy's races knew better than to challenge them, yet many wondered what the humans planned next. Were they here to protect or to punish? What was the true purpose of the gods who had risen from a small blue planet? In the shadows of distant stars, stories spread about the Phantom, the mysterious soldier who disappeared after the war. Some said he was already on another world training new warriors. Others believed he had become a legend that lived in the hearts of all humans. His name was whispered with awe and fear. He was not just a man, but the spirit of humanity itself, the ghost that haunted the nightmares of those who dared to fight Earth. On a quiet night under a sky full of stars, the leaders of Earth gathered. They spoke not of war, but of hope and future. Their victory was not the end, but a beginning. A chance to build a galaxy where courage, justice, and freedom could survive. They knew the path ahead was difficult, but the humans had already proven that no matter the darkness, they would stand tall and fight with laughter in their hearts. The galaxy changed forever because humans had shown that strength was not just in weapons, but in spirit. They had taught that even the darkest war could be met with light and madness. Darkest war could be met with light and madness. They had become legends whose stories would be told for centuries, inspiring generations to rise and fight for their place in the stars. The gods of war had arrived, and their laughter would echo through the universe forever. As Earth looked to the future, the humans prepared for new challenges. Their eyes shone with determination and peace, but also the wild fire of warriors who knew the cost of survival. The galaxy watched and waited, knowing that whatever came next, the humans would face it as they always had, with courage, madness, and an unbreakable will. The unbreakable will. War had ended, but the story of the humans had only just begun. Their legend was written in blood, fire, and laughter. A story of gods who fought not to destroy, but to protect. A story that would live in the hearts of all who dared to dream and fight.